Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to start talking about losing a child. That is a very sad thing for most people, and it can be very impactful on your life. In earlier times, it was not unusual for a parent to bury a child, as Louisa May Alcott's mother did. So, we didn't have the prenatal care back in the day, the vitamins and everything, and so more and more children died, before their first year. Today, with medical advances and the increase in life expectancy in industrialized countries, infant mortality has reached record lows, and a child who survives the first year of life is far more likely to live to old age. And that's good news for all of us. A parent is rarely prepared emotionally for the death of a child. And I would almost say never prepared for the death of a child. Because, for most women, that's your baby. You look forward to it. You wanted it for most women. And then it's not there, and then that's just such a devastating blow. You can't, breathe. Your heart is so heavy, it's just terrible. Such a death, no matter at what age, comes as a cruel, unnatural shock, an untimely event that, in the normal course of things, should not have happened, because in theory, parents should not outlive their children. And when that happens, it's a serious blow. The parents may feel that they have failed, no matter how much they loved and cared for the child. And they may find it hard to let go. And I know when my sister passed away, that was the case for my parents. Like I said, my mother went to, a grief group, and parents are not supposed to outlive their children, so that is a very hard thing for anyone to have to go through. If a marriage is strong, the couple may draw closer together, supporting each other in their shared loss. And not every couple is strong, so that can also break a marriage. But in other cases, the loss weakens and eventually destroys the marriage, like I said. The stress of losing a child may even hasten a parent's death, because they might feel like, there's no reason for them to live now, because that might have been their only child, and, they feel like, what's my purpose now? I don't have one. Although each bereaved parent must cope with grief in his or her own way, some have found that plunging into work, and that my mother went back to work after my sister passed away eventually, interests and other relationships, or joining a support group, eases the pain. And it certainly can, because, you need to process it, grieve, and build back up. The Chilean writer Isabel Allende wrote a family memoir while sitting at the bedside of her comatose dying daughter. So, she couldn't do anything for her daughter. Her daughter was not going to get well, so she put her time to some good use. Some well-meaning friends tell parents not to dwell on their loss, but remembering the child in a meaningful way may be exactly what they need to do. My parents donated my sister's organs, and so we were getting letters from folks, thanking them and everything, and, that was something in some way they felt like, she would want that, because we had all talked about it, and they think that, she would want that, and so that was a good thing. Mourning a miscarriage. At a Buddhist temple in Tokyo, small statues of infants accompanied by toys and gifts are left as offerings to Jizo, an enlightened being who is believed to watch over miscarried and aborted fetuses, and eventually, through reincarnation, to guide them into a new life. Now, I had a miscarriage when I was in my 20s, and I may have had one sooner than that, because thinking back, there was something that was going on with me, and I didn't know what it was. But after having the miscarriage, I think, oh well, maybe that's what that was, and I didn't even know because I was young and dumb, The ritual of Mizuko Kuyo, a rise of apology and remembrance, is observed as a means of making amends to the aborted life. So over there, they have, a ceremony where they apologize to the unborn child. The Japanese word Mizuko means water child. Japanese Buddhists believe that life flows into an organism gradually, like water, and a Mizuko is somewhere on the continuum between life and death. In English, by contrast, there is no word for a miscarried or aborted fetus other than that, or any ritual of mourning, because some people do take the baby, depending on how big or old it was, and they bury it, in a baby area of a cemetery, and sometimes if it's just something very small, it's just discarded as medical waste. So, we could probably learn a little from the Japanese in honoring our deceased children. Families, friends, and health professionals tend to avoid talking about such losses because they are often considered insignificant compared with the loss of a full-term child. Like I say, if the mother feels it, that's still her baby. That's still something growing inside of her, and that's still a big loss to her. Because each person's or couple's experience of loss is unique, it is hard to generalize about the way people deal with these losses. Because, exactly, everybody's unique, everybody's different, so no two people are going to go through the same thing the same way. They tend to rely on inner, instinctive strategies and resources. And sometimes that's not enough, and if you find that to be the case, certainly go talk to a grief counselor and get that hashed out. Differences in the ways men and women grieve may be a source of tension and divisiveness in the couple's relationship, because sometimes men think they have to keep the stiff upper lip, be the strong, silent type, and women want to cry and they want to grieve. And the men's reaction seems very cold to her, so she's going to give him heck about being, unfeeling, when that might not even be the case. He might be feeling very deeply, but he's keeping that inside and not letting it out, because we women are taught it's okay to cry and let it out and all that stuff, and men are not necessarily taught that. Like I said, I grew up where we had the show where me and you are free to be, you and me, and Rosie Greer sang a little song, big old football player guy, it's all right to cry. We tried back in the day, but, sometimes men are still thinking they got to be the strong, silent type, which is not good in relationships. In another study, grieving parents perceive their spouses and extended families as most helpful, and their doctors as least helpful, because a doctor is going to be very clinical about it and he's going to move on. He's not going to give you a lot of sympathy. He'll be like, pat your hand, I'm sorry, and then he's gone. Whereas your family and friends will want to talk to you and make sure you're okay and getting through this. Some bereaved parents benefited from a support group, like I said, my mother went to, and some did not. And I think she was not ready. She ended up quitting, but I think later on she went and she talked to somebody, and I think that helped her, process a lot of things that she went through in her life, and that had happened to her, and what she wanted to do in future and how she wanted to be in future. Couples who have gone through the loss of a baby may need extra compassionate care during a later pregnancy. Though again, responses are diverse. So, if they've lost a baby or two, that anxiety might be there. It's like, oh my God, is this baby going to be okay? Is it going to make it? Am I going to lose another baby? So, and then some people just stay positive and say, whatever God's going to let happen is going to happen. So everyone's different, and certainly be there for folks who have lost a little one, because it is a blow. Medical, legal, and ethical issues. The right to die. Do people have a right to die? Of course, everybody's got a different opinion on that. If so, under what circumstances? How bad do you have to be before you have a right to die? Should a terminally ill person who wants to commit suicide be allowed or helped to do so? Excuse me, some people believe not. Some people believe it's an automatic sin, you go straight to hell. Some people believe that, it's a cheat, that if you commit suicide, you have to be reincarnated and come back again, keep doing it till you get it right. Other folks believe that, God is not a punitive God, God is love, and that if you commit suicide, then, He's going to help you, work through that. Should a doctor prescribe medicine that will relieve pain, but may shorten the patient's life? And a lot of times that happens now with hospice workers. You're provided with morphine. And the advice one of my relatives got was take as much as you need. Knowing that if you take enough morphine, you will end your life. You will stop your breathing and your heart, and you will go. So, in a way, that is kind of already happening now. What about giving a lethal injection to end a patient's suffering? Again, there are injections to keep a patient quiet and out of pain. I have heard of cases where someone's in the hospital fussing and yelling, and the nurse will tell people as why they got the highest dose of morphine the doctor's going to allow them to have. But evidently it's not working, so, it's not really keeping them from suffering. Who decides that a life is not worth prolonging? Does the doctor have a right? Does the patients have a right? Does the patient's family have a right? That's all still up for debate. These are some of the thorny moral, ethical, and legal questions that face individuals, families, physicians, and society. Questions involving the quality of life and the nature and circumstances of death. Should you be allowed to choose your own death? How, soon can you choose your own death? How soon can a family say, get rid of them? How soon can a doctor say, they got no future, turn them off? These are the questions people ask. Suicide. Although suicide is no longer a crime in modern societies, because it used to be, there is still a stigma against it. And there are still insurance policies to where they say if you commit suicide, you don't collect. So, based in part on religious prohibitions and on society's interest in preserving life. And there are people who believe, like I said, that suicide is, biggest sin is murder, because it's self-murder. And there are people who think that, if this life is too bad and you end it, then God's not going to let you quit. That's a cop-out, and you have to come back, do it again. So, opinions differ. A person who expresses suicidal thoughts may be considered, often with good reason, mentally ill. And that's because, there are many situational things, like I said, after my mother passed away, I had situational, good gosh, summertime, you gotta love gnats, not. So, I had depression and anxiety, and I took meds, and then after about 6 months or so, I just quit taking them, because I said I don't feel like that anymore. And I've not needed them ever again. So, in that moment, like I said, I had a plan. I had a suicide plan. I knew what I was going to go do. And I told my doctor, I said, I got a plan and everything, so, I know I need help. But I was just so depressed. I felt like my life was not worth living anymore, because we had plans, and now those plans were never going to, goodness sakes, get away, bug, never going to come to fruition. So, I, at that point, couldn't see a future. And it was like, well, they don't need me anyway. I'm just a burden to them. So, I might as well check out. But I knew that was not mentally healthy. So I went and got the help I needed. On the other hand, as longevity increases and, with it, the risk of long-term degenerative illnesses, a growing number of people consider a mature adult's deliberate choice of a time to end his or her life a rational decision and a right to be defended. I'm sure we all remember Dr. Kevorkian. They used to call him Dr. Death, and he was helping people, assist in their suicide. So, he believed that if you want to go, you have a right to say, I'm done, I want to go. But again, like I say, there are people who say that's not good. I don't think it's great. I'm one of them who kind of thinks like maybe you have to do a do-over. If you quit and you go up and they're like, no. You did not finish your life. There were plans and things. Now you have to go back. Because I don't think God lets you cheat. So, suicide rates in the United States began declining in the late 1990s after a 25% rise from 81 to 97. Still, more than 29,000 people took their own lives in the year 2000, making suicide the 11th leading cause of death and the 3rd leading cause among 15 to 24-year-olds. So our young people were deciding it's not worth it. We're done. We want to be done. The suicide rate in the United States, 10.7 deaths per 100,000, and let's just call it 11. There's not a 0.7th person out there. That's silly. Population is lower than that in many other industrialized countries. That's because here in the United States it's still frowned upon. Statistics probably underestimate the number of suicides since many go unreported. Some, such as traffic accidents and accidental medicinal overdoses, are not recognized as such, but they may be. Also, the figures on suicides often do not include suicide attempts, as estimated 10 to 40% of people who commit suicide have tried before. That's true. And there are people who, when they try to do it, they kind of get scared in the middle of it and back off. And, there's a saying that says people who want to commit suicide do it right the first time. That's not necessarily true. There can become a pattern where someone, escalates to the point where they finally do succeed. So don't listen to that and pay attention to what's going on. A national study found that 60% of non-fatal self-inflicted injuries treated in the U.S. hospital emergency rooms, especially among teenage girls and young women, are probably suicide attempts, and 10% are possible attempts. So, a lot of people are just overlooking, when a teenage girl comes in or a young woman comes in and, they had an accident where they went off the side of the road, or they took too many pills accidentally, forgot how many they took. These are just kind of overlooked. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, and they let it go. But a good doctor would probably not let it go and say, hey, this looks to me like you might have attempted suicide. Are you depressed? Is something going on? You want me to refer you to a mental health professional? That's what a good doctor would do. In most nations, suicide rates rise with age and are higher among men than among women. So that's in most nations where suicide is not looked at as such a bad thing. It's still sad, and they're like, dang, that's a shame that so-and-so felt like, I watched a movie from Sweden where they were, kind of sad that so-and-so chose to end their life, but they weren't like, we would be here, In the United States, although more women than men attempt suicide, men are 4 times as likely to succeed. So when men decide they're checking out, they make sure they're checked out. That is because they tend to use more reliable methods, such as firearms, whereas women are equally likely to choose poisoning. And I heard a psychology teacher say one time it's because women don't want to leave a mess for somebody to have to clean up. It's because that's the way we are. We wouldn't have to clean that up, so we don't want to leave that for anybody else to clean up. But men, they just want to make sure they're gone. So they make sure they're gone. But women will choose poison or something that she might think will knock her out and then it'll kill her, so that she just lays there on the bed, looks like Sleeping Beauty. There's no mess, no muss, no fuss, and she's gone. So that's the difference between men and women on how they decide to check out usually. Native Americans have the highest suicide rates, and that's because mostly they are on reservations that do not have a lot of modern conveniences. There are reservations that do not have power, water, sewage, and with it being seriously, I don't know if any of y'all ever watched The Red Road, but that's a good show. You should watch that. But there are police who don't want them to leave the reservations. There are people who do during the day to work and come back, but in general, it's frowned upon. You stay on your reservation, live your native life, stay out of the white folks' way. So there's not a lot of hope there. There's not a lot of hope that they can have a better future. Now, there are some folks who've done it. There are lawyers who are Native Americans and who are fighting for the Native Americans, trying to make a better life for them. Now, I don't know you ever saw the Diane Sawyer, expose on the reservation, but a lot of it is like that. So it does not surprise me at all that Native Americans would have the highest suicide rate here in the good old USA. Followed by non-Hispanic white persons, and that's because a lot of white people genetically are predisposed to anxiety and depression, and they just decide life's too hard. I'm going to check out. Members of these two groups are approximately twice as likely to commit suicide as Asian Americans, African Americans, and Hispanic Americans. So you guys, you Asian, African, and Hispanic Americans have a little bit of an edge because a lot of times you're not as pre-programmed genetically, and also your religious beliefs might deter you from committing suicide. Suicide rates are higher in the western states and lower in the eastern and midwestern states. In the western states, especially California, there's not as much deterrent as far as religious belief. Now in the southwest, a lot of good Catholics down there, so that's not as big a thing down there. But in the East Coast, where there's less, religiosity, but also, in the Midwest, where farms are being taken over and closing down and things, and life can look pretty hopeless. So in those areas, there's more of a rate of suicide. And that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now, or listen. Until next time.